Once again, welcome to the Church of Amazing Grace. We're so glad that you are with us as we welcome in week number 9 of what we call these Legends of the Faith. And as you can see, significant influencers in the history of the Christian faith. And this has been quite the journey. And today we tackle one that's a longtime favorite of mine, and everybody knows that, C.S. Lewis. Of course, just some really good stuff as we talk about that. C.S. Lewis lived from 1898 to 1963. He would die on November the 22nd, 1963. I tell you that for a reason. He was 65 years old. He, of course, was a British writer. He was a literary scholar and an Anglican lay theologian as well. And he held academic positions in English literature, both at Magdalen College in Oxford, as well as Magdalen College in Cambridge. And he, of course, was best known for some of his writings, the Chronicles of Narnia, Screwtape Letters, a space trilogy thing that a lot of people don't know about. And of course, mainly a lot of folks know him for the Christian apologetics that he wrote about, books like Mere Christianity, Miracles, and The Problem of Pain. Interesting side note to this, as I mentioned a moment ago, he died November 22nd, 1963. Think about that date for a second. And of course, you have to be a certain age maybe to remember that. Nobody really even noticed that he passed away, even though it was a significant thing, particularly in the UK, but even worldwide, because by that time he was very well known. In fact, to this day, that very date, November 22nd, is noted as in the Anglican Church as a C.S. Lewis celebration. That same day, 55 minutes after C.S. Lewis passed away and went to heaven, there was an assassination in Dallas, Texas, and John F. Kennedy was killed. So, of course, that took up all the media coverage. It was a bad day all around because that very same day, English writer Aldous Huxley also passed away. November 22nd, 1963. So anyway, it's one of those things that kind of gets lost in all the other stuff that's going on. And nonetheless, he lived an amazing life. And the writings that he has left for us who have followed have been nothing less than remarkable. Of course, he said, among other things, and I'm going to show you a lot of that today, he said, among other things, the intellectual life is not the only road to God, nor the safest, but we find it to be a road, and it may be the appointed road for us. Not everybody loves C.S. Lewis. Some thinks he's too intellectual, he's too this, or he's too, poetic, or he's too whatever. But many of us have really had our hearts and our minds and really our spiritual well-being, and many times captured by some of his writings. And that's the significance with this. He was a part of a group known as the Inklings. The Inklings, I'm just going to give you, they would get together about once a month or so. No particular time, but they would get together. They were all writers, people like C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, Owen Barfield. He, of course, wrote A Study in Idolatry. He was also a poet, wrote a lot of poetry. People know of him. Charles Williams wrote The Place of the Lion and some other, The Descendant of the Dove, some other, if you're into that, somewhat theologically well-known works. Hugo Dyson, many others. Christopher Tolkien, who would be J.R.R. Tolkien's son, who would really think about what he did the editing and the publication of the 12-volume The History of Middle-earth, which of course has to do with Lord of the Rings and so forth. He was a part of that group. I just tell you that this was sort of their fellowship, and they would get together, and another picture of that. This is really an artificial intelligence picture of the Inklings. They would meet together in a pub, basically, and then share their writings with one another. And of course, that became a very well-known group. By the way, a very little-known fact of history was that they made a little trip across the pond, across the Atlantic, and they went to Yankee Stadium one day as they were doing their writing. Sorry. Don't leave me alone for too long with artificial intelligence, or it's crazy stuff happens like that. Let's get into this, and let's be serious right here for a couple minutes. C.S. Lewis. Wisdom, wonder, and walking in faith. Living Lewis's legacy. Here's the issue here. And this whole series, this is not designed necessarily to be a history lesson. I mean, hopefully you'll learn something about history and it will be helpful to you. More importantly, we're looking to find biblical values in some of these great legends of the faith that can help us in our walk with Christ that we have here going on with us today. And that's really what it's all about. And so we're going to do that again today with C.S. Lewis, and we're going to just look at 4 real simple things about him, along with some of his writings and what the Bible teaches, that's going to help us. I hope will help us. Certainly has helped me inspire us in our own journeys of faith and so forth. The first one is this. One of the things that Lewis emphasized a lot was there's more to life than life. Think about that a minute. There's more to life than life. And let me just show you what I mean by that, because his writings emphasize the importance of the eternal over the temporal, a theme that was central really to his writings, particularly in how he encouraged readers, was to look beyond the material world into the spiritual realities that frame our existence. That was very important to him. Let me show you one of the verses that basically epitomizes that. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, maybe you've seen it before. So we don't look at the troubles that we can see now. Rather, we fix our gaze on things that cannot be seen. For the things we see now will soon be gone, but the things we cannot see will last forever. Lewis's point was, there's more to life than this life. We all know that. Sometimes it's hard to face up to that. You know, as you age and you get to a point where, like we're seeing, my wife and I, and friend here passed away, this classmate here passed away, you begin to come to grips with some of that as well. Here's what Lewis said about that. He said, there are far, far better things ahead than any we leave behind. It's encouraging. We need to remind ourselves of that frequently. Far better things ahead than what we leave behind. Talking about being in the presence of the Lord. Hey, let me show you one more thing he said that it kind of relates, sort of, but not quite. But I think it's worth sharing with you anyway. He says, isn't it funny how day by day nothing changes, but when you look back, everything is different? And speaking of, looking at the things that are unseen as opposed to the things that are seen, this helped me. This sort of crystallized for me the thing that so many times when you're going through life, you go through that whole season of life. Some of you are going through it now, raising kids, and you just one thing, and you just kind of don't stop. People are always saying stop and smell the roses, and don't blink and all that other kind of stuff. Well, it is funny how you can get to a certain place day by day, nothing changes, but then you look back, you're like, everything is different. I've seen that in my own life. Wow. But sometimes when you're in the heat of the moment, in the grind, you don't always realize that. So Lewis's point was this, and it's a biblical point. There's more to life than life. Keep that in mind. You're going through your week, going through your day. Here we are in 2024. Hard to believe, right? Oh, there's more to life than life. Help me to realize that more. Help me to think about that. Help me to live that out. Let me show you a second thing. There's great hope for the doubters. Oh gosh, this is such a great point. Here's the thing. This is a guy that went from atheism to Christianity. Now, he is, I would say, exhibit A of a transformed mind and heart. This would be the classic example. C.S. Lewis. His writing serves many purposes, but especially they're just a tremendous guide for searchers and, yes, for doubters as well, those who question, and for them to explore and maybe ultimately embrace a life that is aligned with Christ. All this can lead to transformation that goes against the grain of the norm, basically, if I can put it that way. So there's great hope for the doubters. Let me show you this. One of the verses that I would point to, and I think that C.S. Lewis would point to, is Romans chapter 12. And Romans chapter 12, and we're going to look really just in verse 2. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. We've shown you this verse before, and it's one that we need to revisit probably frequently. That you fit in without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. Readily recognize what He wants from you. Quickly respond to it. Unlike the culture around you, always dragging you down to its level of immaturity, God brings the best out of you and develops well-formed maturity in you. You know what He's saying there? If I could just kind of put it in a nutshell. Think and keep thinking. There is no better stimulation for the human mind than to be thinking on the things above and the things of Christ and the things of God. And yes, it can blow you away sometimes. We don't always understand everything, but He says think, and then He says don't just go along without even thinking. I always like to use the term lemming there, that great game that I used to play where the lemmings would follow each other right off the cliff. See that today in our culture also, just group think. Well, the Bible teaches to be individual. Isn't that amazing? People classify Christians in this way or that way. The Bible says, think. Don't just go along with stuff without thinking. Lewis talked about this in his book, Mere Christianity. He put it this way: faith is the art of holding on to things that your reason has once accepted in spite of your changing moods. So there's going to be some questions. There's going to be some doubts. But he said, faith is holding on to the things that your reason has once accepted, but now your moods are, because we all go through different moods. I'm not sure what I believe today. I'm not sure how I feel today. Let's go back to what we reasoned out, we thought through in terms of our faith. And then Lewis was just so great about that. He adds this as well. This is from the Screwtape Letters. This is the book where it's a senior demon talking to the junior demon, fiction obviously, telling them how to mess up Christians. It's a great book. It really is. I've read it a few times, and it's just great. And so here the senior demon is talking to the junior demon, and he says, our cause is never more in danger than when a human, no longer desiring but still intending to do our enemy's will, that's God's will, looks round upon a universe of which every trace of Him seems to have vanished. They're not finding God. And they ask why He has been forsaken, but they still obey. In other words, and that's a lot, but in other words, what they're saying is there's great victory in heaven. When we look around, and sometimes we wonder, and sometimes we wonder, where's God in all this? But we still turn around and seek to follow Him. That's what He's saying here. That's why, you sometimes have doubts, but you just march on, in faith. Another time in Mere Christianity, doubt must be overcome by faith, and faith that does not ignore doubt, but confronts it. We have to confront it. We can't ignore it. And one of the encouraging things I have as a pastor over the years is when somebody comes to me sometimes and says, you're not going to want to hear this, but I'm having some doubts and some questions. I'm like, yes, that's okay. That means you're thinking. And you know what? God's bigger than your doubts. He's okay with that. He still loves you, and He still accepts you, and you can still trust Him. That's such a great thing. So that's the other thing about one of the things we can think about is as we look at the wisdom and the wonder and walking in faith in Lewis's legacy is there's great hope for the doubters. We find that in the readings and in the teachings of C.S. Lewis and in the Bible, more importantly, right? Third thing I want you to see, the importance of grace in conversational confrontations. Big term, I know. Tried to simplify it, but I even asked artificial intelligence to help me with that, but it didn't work. The importance of grace in conversational confrontations. This has to do with when we talk to people about our faith, or people talk to us. And how do we handle that? Maybe they're an atheist, maybe they're an agnostic, maybe they're a nihilist. They don't believe anything. Just exist, How do we approach that? And this has been a great journey for me over the years because I used to be very confrontational, many times lacking grace. And that doesn't get you anywhere. Not only that, but that's not what the Bible teaches. Let me show you what the Bible teaches. 1 Peter chapter 3. Instead, he says, you must worship Christ as Lord of your life. And if someone asks, here we go. And if someone asks you about your hope as a believer, always be ready to explain it. But do this in a gentle and respectful way. Keep your conscience clear. Then if people speak against you, they will be ashamed when they see what a good life you live because you belong to Christ. Isn't that good? So this is one of the things that Lewis was just the master at, the grace and the wit in which he engaged critics as well as supporters. It really had to do with his skill in presenting the Christian faith in an appealing, very thought-provoking kind of way. There's another verse I want you to see that I think characterized Lewis's life, and I hope will characterize my life, and I hope you probably would agree, would characterize your life. Colossians chapter 4. Use your heads, here we go again, as you live and work among outsiders. Don't miss a trick. Make the most of every opportunity. Watch this. Be gracious in your speech. And some Bibles read, full of grace, seasoned with salt. The goal is to bring out the best in others in a conversation, not put them down, not cut them out. I would add, not to win that conversation or that debate. Does that sound like some maybe a little self-confession in there? There might be some. Hopefully not in recent years, but there were many times when I was looking to win that argument. I want to win that argument. Yes, Jesus loves. Yes, God exists. And if you don't, you're an idiot. That doesn't really help too much. That's what he's saying. Be gracious in your speech. I tell you what Lewis wrote in The Weight of Glory, one of his books, is significant and very much repeats this. And it's really good. Let me show you to you. There are no ordinary people. There are no ordinary people. You've never talked to a mere mortal, but it is mortals whom we joke with, work with, marry, snub, and exploit. He gets it all in there. There are no ordinary people. What we need to understand, and it's relevant because he tells us, listen, we're dealing with people who are immortal, with a soul that was made in the image of God. Don't forget that. And treat them with that sort of reverence and that kind of respect in all that you do and all that you say. And that's important for us as we stop and think about that. So there you go. That's the third thing. The wisdom, the wonder, the walking in faith, part of this legacy of Lewis. There's more to life than this life. There's a great hope for doubters, which we all can be at times, and the importance of grace in these conversational confrontations. Last thing I want to show you, it is the simplicity of genuine faith. This is just so important. You know, we make things so complicated. We live in a world that, especially in the church world, we like to make theological concepts and talk about hypostatic union or supralapsarianism or whatever it might be, theistic evolution. There's just simplicity in genuine faith. And this guy with his big brain was able to capture that. And I think it's important for us because, think about this. Lewis's ability to communicate profound theological truths in children's stories like Chronicles of Narnia. I mean, that is amazing. That demonstrates the wonder and the faith as well in that understanding. So just think about that for a moment. That's really amazing when you think about it. Let me show you the Bible. Probably many of you have seen this passage before. For an answer, Jesus, he's being questioned by the Pharisees and so forth. Jesus called over a child. This is in Matthew 18. When he stood in the middle of the room and he said, I'm telling you once and for all, that unless you return to square one and start over like children, you're not even going to get a look at the kingdom, let alone get in. Whoever becomes simple, here it is, and elemental again, like this child, will rank high in God's kingdom. What's more, when you receive the childlike on my account, it's more like receiving me. Jesus himself says, hey, guys, simple childlike faith is what I'm looking for. Not some complicated conundrum of some sort. In Mere Christianity, this is a little long, but I want you to see it. In Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis wrote this, and I think it says it very well. Christianity seems at first to be all about morality, all about duties and rules and guilt and virtue. Yet it leads you out of that. See that again. Yet it leads you out of that into something beyond. One has a glimpse of a country where they do not talk about those things, except perhaps as a joke. Everyone there is filled full with what we would call goodness, but they don't call it goodness. They don't call it anything. They're not thinking about it. They're too busy looking at the source from which it comes. Isn't that great? We don't get hung up on all this duty and obligation and guilt and the rituals. We're looking at the source of our blessing, which is Jesus. That's just so simple. It's so good. It's so powerful. How can you miss that? You know, that's the issue here. The wisdom, the wonder, and the walking in faith, living that Lewis legacy in my own life. There's more to life than life. There's great hope for the doubters, of which we all are at times. The importance of grace in these conversational confrontations, and just the simplicity of genuine faith. I want to leave you with this last thing. Just another quote from C.S. Lewis. Obviously, it would be most appropriate to do that. And just want to leave you with this. All that we can call human history, money, poverty, ambition, war, prostitution, classes, empires, slavery, it's a terrible long story of man trying to find something other than God, which will make him happy. His point here is, and I think it's so important, we go in a lot of different directions. Some are okay, some are not okay. But none really work if we're looking for a source to satisfy the soul, to bring contentment to the soul that can only come through Christ. Kind of like what Pascal said. There's that vacuum, that God-shaped vacuum in everyone's life, which can only be filled through Jesus and God. That's what we take away from this legacy. And may God just build that into our hearts and may that our lives reflect those qualities. Pray with me real briefly, quickly, please. Thank you, Lord Jesus, for your grace and for your love. And help us to live just exactly like this. In Jesus' name, amen.